Hi there, everybody. Welcome to another lecture for interpersonal communication. So, this lecture is about chapter 4, and it's going to be in page 28 of your packet. But before I begin the lecture, I'm going to have you imagine something. So, what I want you to imagine that we're all in class. Remember those days? And imagine you are taking my class. So here you are taking my class. You're sitting in the classroom in person. Maybe you're wearing a mask. Maybe I am. I don't know. But we're in class, and I'm just doing the normal first day of class type of stuff. And what I do on the first day is I talk about the class, just like I sort of did in the welcome video, if you watch that. So I'm talking about the class and laying out the assignments and telling you what you're going to be learning this semester. And then I have to go through all the like boring stuff, talking about, no late homework assignments and my grading policies. And I actually have this pretty strict attendance policy, but you don't need to worry about that because you're not in person. But if you were in person, I'd be telling you about my attendance policy, blah, 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 blah. And then I dismiss you. So suppose you had a friend who was also in the class. So then you and your friend go out for coffee after the class and you guys are chatting about the class and you are saying, wow, I am really excited about this interpersonal communication class. I think she seems like a really cool instructor and I think we're going to learn a lot and it's going to be helpful for like all kinds of things with work and my romantic partner. And it's going to be a cool class. I'm like stoked. I'm excited about this class. And your friend goes, really? You're excited? I think she's horrible. I mean, did you see it took her 5 minutes just to turn on the computer? Did you see she miscounted when she was passing papers out to the rows? Did you hear all that stuff about how she's so strict about late work and attendance and blah, blah, blah? She just seems like a nightmare. The class seems stupid. Like, who doesn't know how to communicate? Like, duh. So here you are, the two of you sat in the exact same class, heard the same thing, experienced the exact same thing, but you have one take, your friend has another take on what you experienced. What do we call that? We call that we call that perception. So it's not a matter of each of you has a different opinion. It's bigger than that. It's that you have two different perceptions regarding what you have just experienced. And perception is highly linked with communication. A lot of our conflicts are due to differences in perception. So have you ever had a conflict with someone because you saw a situation from one point of view and it seemed perfectly logical to you? However, this other person had a different point of view and therefore you had conflict. So perception is like our point of view on something, right? In my example, I would have asked you who is correct. Were you correct or your friend? And of course, you might be thinking, well, both would be correct, professor, because perception is just everybody's perception. And I would say, no, you are correct. It's an awesome class. You're going to learn a lot. Your friend's crazy. No, I wouldn't say that. You're right. It's about perception. So we're going to dive into perception in this chapter. So here we go. Have you guys seen this picture before? This is been around for a while. And when you look at this image, what do you see? What do you see? Do you see? I'm going to have you keep looking at that image while I shut my window because there's someone cutting trees. So look at this image. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So some of you may look at this image and you may see an old woman. Others might see only a young woman. And if we were in class, I would show you more which image, how to see both images. But there are actually two images in this picture. One is an old haggy lady and one is a younger woman. And so this just shows you two people can look at the exact same thing, but see two totally different things. That's what perception is all about. Your point of view. And the thing about perception for all of us, in our brains, we don't acknowledge that we're making a perception. In our heads, it's just real. It's not like, oh, well, my perception is it's an old lady. You just say, oh, no, that's an old lady. That's what happens in life. We think our perspective is the truth. And so that's what we're going to clarify with this lecture about perception. So these are just different ways that you can explain what perception is. I am not going to give you a precise definition. Just in a general sense, it's our version of reality. It's the process by which we become aware of objects, events, people's behavior. In this class, just like with everything, we focus on interpersonal perception, which is when we try to make sense of others' behaviors and we try to make sense of our interactions with other people. So perception has to do with the way we see the world, which affects our communication choices, and it affects the way we interpret other people and what they do and what they say, and what does all that mean? That's all perception. So we are going to begin by talking about 3 stages of the interpersonal perception process. 3 stages. Stage 1 we call selection. So your brain is, my brain, your brain is constantly being bombarded with stimuli. Constantly. So if I asked you, I don't know where you are watching this video, but wherever you are watching this video, if I were to ask you, I want you to look around the room you're sitting in and notice every possible thing that you could visually see. And then I want you to write it down on a paper and try to come up with 100 things you can see. And if you can come up with 100, I'll give you extra credit. Okay, ready, go. No, I'm not going to have you do that. But look around your room for a second. If I told you to start noticing every little thing possible, there are a lot of things. I can't even tell you what's going on in the room I'm in. I got a lot of things in here. I got games, I got books, I got photo albums, I've got pens, I've got battery. I got so much stuff in here, it's crazy. So what's the point of that? Hopefully you're not constantly noticing everything that you are capable of noticing. So what happens is we only select certain stimuli to notice. So our brains are capable of like noticing lots and lots of stimuli that we can see, that we can hear, that we can smell, etc. But most of what we are able to notice, we ignore. And we only pay attention to certain stimuli to notice. We only pay attention to certain stimuli. So what causes us to notice certain stimuli and ignore most of it? We definitely notice a message that is more intense or repeating. So I just told you that outside my window there's a tree trimmer, and you know how loud those tree trimmers are. Well, guess what? I noticed that. I noticed that message because it was so loud. I could not ignore it. I had to shut my window. When you go to a party and there's some loud guy at the party, you're going to notice the loud guy. You're going to maybe even remember the next time you go to a party, oh yeah, that guy, I know him, he's the loud guy. There might have been 20 other people at that party that you didn't really pay that much attention to, but the one who was the loudest, you noticed. So when something is more intense, loud, repetitive, we notice. We also notice contrast or change, right? When something changes, we tend to notice. So if we were face to face, I would ask this question, which would be, so have you ever had this experience where you drastically changed your hair? Either the color of your hair, the length of your hair. What happened the next day when you went to work or school? Probably every single person noticed. Prior to that, people didn't really notice your hair that much, I assume. But when it changed, especially drastically changed, people notice it. So we tend to notice when something changes, and we sort of take for granted when things stay the same. our needs and our motives cause us to pay attention to certain stimuli. So I would also ask you this if we were in class face to face. Have you ever been wanting a certain kind of a car? And maybe you wanted this sort of a kind of a car for a while. Probably as soon as you kind of realized you wanted a particular kind of car, when you're on the road, you started noticing all of these cars. And everybody else was not noticing all of these cars except for you, because what you wanted. So it'd be like if I'm thinking about painting the inside of my house and I'm not sure what color, but I want to paint my inside of my house. When I go to other people's houses, what am I going to notice? The color on their walls. And you might go to those people's houses and you don't even know what color is on their walls. Unless the color is hot pink or fuchsia, that's an intense message. Then you would notice the color probably. But if it's just your average gray or drab, olive, whatever, you're not going to notice that. But I would notice it because I want to paint my walls, and because of my needs, I'm going to notice. Our current life situation, what does that mean? So a personal example I can share is 16 years ago, I started noticing something all around me that I just like one day, all of a sudden, bam, I started noticing everywhere twins. Soon as I found out that I was pregnant with twins, and they are 15 now, so 15, minus 9 months, whenever I found out, you know what I thought? This is embarrassing. I'm like, oh my gosh, there are so many more twins these days. Gosh, what a coincidence. I'm having twins, and now there's just so much more twins. Wow. Well, that's not what was happening. What was happening is because of my life situation, being pregnant with twins, all of a sudden, I am noticing twins everywhere. And the day before that, if I didn't know I was pregnant with twins, all twins could have been everywhere. I would have paid no attention. Our mood. So when we are in a good mood, we tend to notice more pleasant things. And when we're in a bad mood, we tend to notice more crappy things. So think about when you're driving down the street in your car. When you're in a pretty good mood, you're going to notice like, oh, it's a pretty day outside. Oh, I love this song on the radio. Oh, this is my favorite song. And then somebody might be driving, not the best, but maybe you don't really pay that much attention, some other driver. However, if you're already in a bad mood, you're going to notice every driver that gets on your nerves. You're going to notice every red light. It's just those things are just going to stick out. And you're going to drive right by the same scenery, but you're probably not going to pay attention to the pretty scenery around you because you're just in a bad mood. Okay, so step 2, organization. So what we've done so far is we've just become aware. We've noticed something. So after selecting information from the environment, we must organize it in a meaningful way to make sense of the world. So we've noticed something. Now we try to give a category. We try to organize what we have noticed in our brain. So what we use to organize in our brain is something called a perceptual schema. A perceptual schema is a cognitive framework that allows us to give order to the information we have selected. So that's kind of a fancy definition, kind of long. Cognitive means it's in your thinking, right? Every time you hear the word cognitive, you might hear cognitive in other classes. Cognitive means it's in your brain, it's in your thinking. So we develop these frameworks in our brain that help us classify or give order to whatever information we have chosen to pay attention to. Another way to think of these perceptual schemas, think of them like mental boxes. like imaginary mental boxes that we use to help us categorize the information. So, for example, I might notice a person when I meet them, and I might notice a lot of their physical features on their face. Let's just say their face. I notice their face. What we do quickly, we make an assessment, and I might say, oh, attractive person. Now, we do this quickly. We just organize the information. We might do it according to physical constructs, or I might have an interaction with someone, and based on a variety of behaviors that I'm noticing, I say friendly person, or I might classify rude person. So I don't really stop and think to myself, oh, I am noticing right now that this person is talking in a positive tone and they are smiling and they just asked me how I'm doing. Therefore, friendly person. We do this very quickly. We notice a bunch of behaviors and then we quickly make a category in our brain, friendly person. Or we might do it by role. Like you would walk, if you could walk into a classroom right now on the first day, you might quickly go student, teacher, because you're making categories. So you kind of do this, your brain does this automatically. Your brain automatically notices a bunch of stuff, and then whatever you are noticing, you're putting into these quick categories to make things easier for you to process. So what that can lead to is stereotyping. You've all heard of stereotyping. If we were face to face, we'd have more of a lively discussion about stereotyping. So I'll just have to have this discussion with myself right now. Stereotyping is an exaggerated belief associated with a categorizing system. So let's see what's next. Okay, so there are problems of stereotyping, which we're going to get to in a second. But the categorizing system I'm referring to, it could be any category. So you could be stereotyped based on what job you have. If you're a certain job, there might be beliefs that people think about you just based off your job. Or if you drive a certain car, people might think a lot about you because you own that car. Or if you live in a certain city or a certain county, a certain state, if you're voting for a certain person for president, people might stereotype you based on that. So when I say group, the beliefs associated with the categorizing system, it could be any group. It could be the color of your hair. It could be that someone with blonde hair, someone meets them, they think, oh, people with blonde hair are this, this, and this. You could be stereotyped based on your height. Tall people are like this, short people are like that. You could be stereotyped based on your accent. If you have a Southern accent, a New York accent, a British accent. So do you see what I'm getting here? The stereotyping could be based off of almost any group. So what happens is, if I am doing the stereotyping and I meet someone and they drive a certain kind of car, I might say, oh, I know a lot about that person just because they drive that car. So that's an exaggerated belief that I'm associating with a categorizing system. So I'm going to use the example, people from Orange County. There are some negative stereotypes out there regarding people from Orange County. Like what? Oh, well, like people from Orange County are snobby. People from Orange County are shallow. People from Orange County are rude. People from Orange County are rich. So, what are the problems of stereotyping? Well, let's say you go to visit your cousin who lives in Iowa. You get on a plane, you fly to Iowa, you go there for the weekend, and you're at a party, and your cousin is introducing you. Oh, this is my cousin Joe, and he's from Orange County. Now, if someone is meeting you and they have a stereotype that people from Orange County are rich, snobby, conceited, and rude, Is that person going to want to really get to know you and interact with you more? No. Why? Because they think they already know you. They think they know all they need to know because of the one thing about you, you're from Orange County. So stereotyping can lead to a lot of communication problems, especially if it's a negative stereotype, because you're assuming you know a bunch of stuff about the person that may or may not be true. When I say may or may not be true, so does anyone know anyone from Orange County who happens to be rich or conceited or snobby? I do. So stereotypes are not always wrong. Sometimes they're spot on correct, but obviously it's inaccurate to say everyone from Orange County is rude, snobby, and rich. That's the mistake. You cannot put everybody in one group in the same basket that everybody's exactly the same in every way. So those are the problems of stereotyping. How do we avoid the communication problems that come from excessive stereotyping? Well, do you see that the problem is you're treating someone as if they are a group member? Oh, you're in the person from Orange County group. Oh, you're in the person who drives this kind of a car group. Oh, you're in the blonde hair group. Oh, you're in the voting for this person group. So instead of treating someone like they're part of a group, instead you want to treat people as individuals. Keyword, individuals, instead of assuming that they possess the same characteristics as every other member of the quote group. That's the key right there. So the person meeting you from Iowa should be treating you as your own individual person, not as part of the Orange County snobby, snuck up rich person group. Now they might meet you and say, oh my gosh, she is so snobby, snuck up, and rich. I'm not saying that you're like that. I'm sure you're a very nice person. But I mean, the stereotype could end up being correct. That's why I'm telling you that. I'm not telling you stereotypes are always wrong. I just said that. But the point is, give the person the benefit of the doubt before you operate based on your assumptions and stereotypes. All righty. Let's see if I can squeeze one more little thing in here. So should we always avoid making generalizations? Is it wrong to make a generalization? No. We make generalizations every day. I am constantly making generalizations about you people, students. I assume that you want me to keep my lectures short and to the point. Sorry, today's lecture isn't that short. I assume you want me to give you information about what's on the exam. I assume you don't want me leaving you high and dry and saying, well, good luck with this semester. You know, I'm not going to be much help. So I make these assumptions about you guys, you people, I should say. That's fine. There is nothing wrong. You cannot treat every experience and situation as if it's entirely brand new. That would just be too much work. So you just have to be careful if you're especially making negative stereotypes about people that you're interacting with, and check yourself and make sure you're treating people, at least at the beginning, as an individual. Okay, punctuation has to do with the determination of cause and effect in a series of interactions. So if you are arguing about who started it, you are arguing about punctuation. So a classic example would be the demand and withdrawal pattern of communication. So if you have two people, let's say Fred and Wilma, that are married, and Wilma's complaint is that, well, let me talk. Fred has a complaint. Wilma won't shut up. She is such a nag. She just keeps on me. Fred, we gotta talk more. We gotta talk about the relationship. Fred, we need to talk. Fred, I'm not happy. We need to talk. And the more she does this, the more Fred's like, oh my God, will she just shut up? So the more she's like, Fred, the more he backs away and he withdraws. The more he withdraws, the more she's, Fred. And the more she's, Fred, the more he's like, and backs away. So that just keeps going on and on and on and on. It's like a chicken and the egg. Who started it? Fred or Wilma? Fred or Wilma? The more Fred withdraws, the more Wilma nags, the more Wilma nags, the more Fred withdraws, and on it goes. So it's a matter of punctuation. Fred withdraws because Wilma nags, period, or Wilma nags because Fred withdraws, period. So when you're arguing about who started it, was it Fred or Wilma? That's a difference in punctuation. The issue is punctuation. Okay. All right, we're going to take a break and come back for part 2 of this lecture.